I've been asked to give a short presentation on investor information, and I will relate a bit to what was already said this morning. I want to use sometimes a disclaimer in the sense that I want to share with you my practitioner's view. So how do I look at things from the day-to-day practice of an investor? So it's much more based on NN Investment Partners examples, but it's more general. So it's not just from our view. I think it's in general. And of course, let it be very clear. We as investors are extremely interested in sustainability. For us, sustainability, corporate responsibility is a very important topic to be aware and also for us to make things happen. So the title of my presentation is Need or Nice to Have. And let's hope that in these 15 minutes after my presentation, you can guess what the answer is. To start with, to be honest, it is very important to share with you that investors are looking for value creation. That means if you invest money and put money to work in the economy, you need to be aware that it needs to have some return. But in the meantime, you can put your money to work in the whole economy in all the world. So important for us, it is that things can change in certain areas, local. So that means that content and context is extremely important. Both the content of the information and the things that we are looking for at companies is important, but also the local context. And as you see on the picture, you can see many, many birds. If you take a distant view, you see only two. If you really look close in this Portuguese style, you see more birds. So what I mean to say is perspectives change if you are close by or far away. And for us as investor based in the Netherlands, but also with local offices, it's extremely important to be aware. So we need to assess the role and responsibility of companies, how they act, behave, and perform their business and service in the economy in a local context. So it's also important that companies make us aware of sometimes local context of things that are maybe not as fully aware by investors sort of seated far away. So there's no one size fits all. I already want to bring this to you that we as investors are open for that and that these things are also important to be aware. Then the second basic things, and it is very important that many investors like us, but really be aware, it's not just us, it's actually all international investors are part of what's called the PRI, the Principles for Responsible Investment. And they are some principles. And principle 3, for instance, and I've highlighted that one, is you look for disclosure on ESG issues. And ESG issues can be all kinds of issues, what I always call related to the role and responsibility of companies in society and economy. So we have the sort of obligation to look at that, to take that into account. And we do that. So it's not just because I wake up in the morning and I find it important. No, this is something we are committed to. And this is something that is part of our way of assessing and analyzing companies. So next to that commitment on a more international level, we have also our own framework, our own beliefs. And on the slide, you can see that in the small gray area, and I highlighted them with the sentence next to it, responsible investment beliefs. It is putting capital to work. And why is this so important? Because we have a choice. I want you to be aware that investors have a choice how to allocate their money, where to put their money to work, which investments to choose. And I think that's extremely important. And to be able to put our capital to work, we need to be aware of content and context, because we need to make investment decisions. And we need as content and local context to make better informed decisions. So putting capital to work in the real economy is actually what we do as investors, and we need information. Maybe I give away already the title of my presentation, but it is extremely important that we have this, and it's based on international commitments, but also our own internal way of making this happen. So a bit of theory, but let's go a bit deeper. So what are the things that we are looking for? And for instance, I said already, investors are looking for value creation. So how does companies, issuers, organizations, associations who either issue bonds or have shares to the market, how do they operate? And especially in these times, and we did this year already some series on upside down, meaning that in the economy and society, things are a bit turned upside down because of the current COVID-19. Business models are also turned upside down. And these business models the change can then be either difficult, but also an opportunity. So for investors, it is now maybe more than ever extremely important to be aware of the business model's outlook. So why do I want to share this with you? And I really enjoyed the previous presentation by Liliane, because she also mentioned materiality framework. And yes, I understand this is maybe not perfectly well seeable for you as viewer, but be aware that on the slide, a bit on the top, it says almost left orange column, ESG, and it's on top business model, because our materiality framework, meaning we define what we think is extremely relevant, important to make choices of, and what are the topics, is business model. And most people only want to have ESG information, but we want to have information about business model, about opportunities, innovation. How does a company makes its own role and responsibility in society? Because that's maybe even currently more important than just simple metrics on ESG parameters. So assessing the business model outlook, and that is information, honestly, that is not always easy to find or to discover in reporting or in information on websites. Yes, companies disclose what they do, but it is always with hindsight, always looking back. So what is the purpose of this slide? To show you that this is a snapshot of our materiality framework. This is what we deem important. What are the topics that we want to have information on from companies, or we want information on that we are looking for? That is extremely important, that it's also a model. So sharing that in either presentations does not always have to be in reports or in annual topics, but also in maybe investor PowerPoints, in investor updates, in speeches of management board members. These are things that you can also share with us, because that is where analysts and people like me listen to, look to, and have a view on. So it is about ESG and also the business model. And that is something I would like to share with you. And why is this business model extremely important? Because it showcases how prepared is a company for the future. So Liliana said in the introduction, future-proofed investment. So we are an investor for the long term. Most investors invest for the longer term, because then you really get to know either the companies you invest in, but also the companies get to know a bit what you as investors want. And for instance, I always say to companies that their risk is also our risk, and their opportunity is also our opportunity. If companies really make the changes that are needed to keep on continuing value creation, it is important. Let us be aware that sustainability is actually a verb. It's something that means action. It is the ability to sustain, to thrive in the future, to keep on performing on your business parameters. So business model, I wrote it down actually, business model and value creation are very closely connected to ESG parameters. So having said that, it is for us as investors very important to have information, and that we can have on several ways. So based on this type of commitments and based on what we're seeking from the commitment from the PRI, and seeking on our own framework where we look for, we look for also business model information. What is a company doing? And I know it's mostly difficult to describe, but I would really, sort of incentivize and make you enthusiastic on sharing these type of topics with investors. Because in the end, you can have then also meaningful conversations or dialogues with investors. And at the end, that is very, very important. So allow me to share something else also with you. It was very interesting to see that also Liliane shared with us about the GRI, the CSP framework, and all the things that matter in the materiality framework. but also we have our own commitments. So we as an investor also have our own policies, commitments. So we wrote down what we are doing. So my message is actually, yes, we as investors expect things to be reported or to be shared with us by companies and issuers. But in the other way around, you as a disclosure or a company can also look and publicly available, what actually does these investors expect from me? Because investors nowadays do publish their views, their stance. We even called it a viewpoint policy. It's not the best name. It's actually a really terrible name, to be honest. Please don't tell it to my colleagues. It is, but it shares. We share on the topics what we expect. What is our view on these topics? We also published a statement on climate change. So, what do we feel about climate change, global warming, and what does it mean for our portfolios? Because I think that's the second important thing to share next to the general commitments, that we always want to make the connection with our portfolios. Because the other belief that we had next to putting capital to work is providing a decent return, having a yield on our investments. So we had a statement on climate change, and earlier this year, we published also what we deem is important for electricity generation companies. And the title says it all, challenging utilities to limit climate change. So here we describe our view on the situation, on the sector, not as an expert on that specific sector. Again, content and context, that is known much more by the companies, but how we look at it and which type of information we need and what do we expect from the companies we want to put our capital to work in the economy, how they behave, act, and which steps they take on the energy transition. So this is not a slide to make advertisement for our company, but it is to share that we also make publications and share with the outside world and companies what we expect. The flip side is that I have to walk my talk. I have to talk my walk, but also walk the talk. I have to say on a certain moment, this is what we discuss with companies. Yes, we can invest in this company because it fits within our criteria, our commitments. This is in line with what we expect. So here we can make the next steps. So data, metrics become then also important. So the third important message is, yes, next to outlook and general perceptions of value creation, sometimes data, specific metrics, specific topics of interest. Is it with everybody the same? No. So for that sense, it's easy for me to talk and more difficult for the companies to share, because it's for me relatively easier, because I would like to have certain information and not all investors want the same information. As Liliana pointed out, with CESP, the Integrated Reporting Framework, or GRI, you can see per sector what is most important. And slowly but surely, you see things also being more standardized. Good. As I said, I wanted to be brief, and here it's already the last slide, and I will share with you, I think, sort of conclusion is that we also report. So last year we reported on the steps that we took. We even reported on some dialogues we had with some Polish energy companies, and that we went to a conference. So in that sense, you also might expect something from us. So it is about content and context. An open dialogue, it is sharing. And looking at the title, investors need this information. Don't make any mistakes. We cannot make good investment decisions if we don't have important information. And important information is maybe about the past, because that's actually what's reported on, but also about the future. What are the steps that you're aiming at? What's your ambition? So please, my plea is step up to this challenge and share and inform, because that is extremely important for investors, and I think even now more important than ever.